If you're exposing Lambda Function URLs to the internet without understanding VPC integration, you're basically leaving your back door wide open while installing a fancy lock on the front. I just helped a startup fix this exact issue, and they had no idea their Lambda was accessible from anywhere on the planet.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Network Ninja Cloudcast. I'm here with our resident cloud expert, and today's topic sounds pretty important.
Great to have you here. Today we're diving into Lambda Function URLs, VPC integration, and why getting this wrong can expose your entire backend. Trust me, this is one of those things that seems simple but has some serious gotchas.
Okay, so I've been using Lambda Function URLs because they're so convenient. You just enable it and boom, you have an HTTPS endpoint. But you mentioned something about VPC integration. I thought Lambda Function URLs were separate from VPC stuff?
That's exactly the misconception that gets people in trouble. Here's the thing. Lambda Function URLs give you a dedicated HTTPS endpoint like your function id.lambda-url.us east1.on.aws. Super convenient, right? But by default, your Lambda function runs in AWS's managed network, not your VPC. When you enable a function URL, it's publicly accessible unless you configure authentication.
Wait, so even if I have my database in a private VPC subnet, my Lambda with a function URL is just floating out there in AWS land?
Exactly. Think of it like this. Imagine your VPC is a secure office building with badge access, security cameras, and locked doors. Your Lambda without VPC integration is like an employee who works from a coffee shop. They can still call into the office to access resources, but they're sitting in a public space where anyone can walk up to them.
That analogy makes sense. But technically speaking, how does Lambda actually connect to my VPC resources then?
Great question, and this is where it gets interesting. When you configure VPC integration for Lambda, AWS creates elastic network interfaces, or ENIs, in your specified subnets. These ENIs get private IP addresses from your subnet's CIDR range. So if your subnet is 10.0.1.0 out of 24, your Lambda's ENI might get 10.0.1.47. Now your Lambda can communicate with RDS, Elasticache, or any private resource using private IP addresses.
So the Lambda is now inside my secure office building. But what about the function URL? Is that still public?
This is the critical part. The function URL remains publicly accessible over the internet regardless of VPC configuration. VPC integration only affects outbound connections from your Lambda to other resources. The function URL ingress path is completely separate. It goes through AWS's managed infrastructure, not your VPC's Internet Gateway or NAT Gateway.
Oh, that's confusing. So I could have a Lambda that's VPC connected to my private database, but the function URL is still wide open to the internet?
Precisely. And this is where security best practices become crucial. You have two authentication options for function URLs. First is AWS_IAM, which requires requests to be signed with signature version 4. Only principals with Lambda invoke function URL permission can call it. Second is none, which means anyone with the URL can invoke your function.
I'm guessing none is the dangerous one that people use because it's easier.
You got it. I see this constantly in production. People set auth type to none because they want their front end to call the Lambda directly without dealing with IAM credentials in the browser. But here's the thing. If you need public access, you should put API Gateway or CloudFront in front of your Lambda instead. With CloudFront, you can use origin access control to restrict the function URL to only accept requests from your CloudFront distribution.
Can you walk me through what that actually looks like configuration-wise?
Sure. In your Lambda function URL configuration, you set auth type to AWS_IAM. Then in CloudFront, you create an origin pointing to your function URL and enable origin access control with signing behavior set to always sign. CloudFront automatically signs requests using its service principal. In your Lambda's resource-based policy, you add a statement allowing cloudfront.amazonaws.com to invoke your function, with a condition that the source ARN matches your specific CloudFront distribution.
That's way more secure than just leaving it open. What about the VPC side? Any gotchas there?
Big one. When your Lambda is VPC connected and needs to call AWS services like S3, DynamoDB, or Secrets Manager, it can't reach them over the internet anymore because it's in your private subnet. You need VPC endpoints. For S3 and DynamoDB, use gateway endpoints. They're free. For other services like Secrets Manager or SSM Parameter Store, you need interface endpoints, which cost about $7.20 per month per endpoint per availability zone.
So the common mistake is connecting Lambda to a VPC and then wondering why it can't reach AWS services anymore?
Exactly. I see this all the time. Someone connects their Lambda to a VPC to access RDS, and suddenly their S3 calls timeout. They forgot that VPC-connected Lambdas lose direct internet access. Either add a NAT gateway, which costs around $32 per month plus data processing, or use VPC endpoints for each AWS service you need.
Let me make sure I've got this straight. Lambda function URLs are always publicly routable. VPC integration only affects outbound traffic from Lambda. I should use AWS_IAMAuth with CloudFront in front for public APIs, and VPC-connected Lambdas need VPC endpoints or NAT gateways to reach AWS services.
Perfect summary. One final pro tip: use security groups on your Lambdas any to restrict what it can talk to. If your Lambda only needs to access RDS on port 5432, don't allow all outbound traffic. Principle of least privilege applies to network rules too.
This is super helpful. I'm definitely going to audit my Lambda configurations after this.
That's it for today's episode. If you found this helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.
And share this with anyone who's building serverless applications. This stuff matters.
Thanks for watching the Network Ninja Cloudcast. Go check your Lambda function URL auth settings right now. See you in the next one.